Hello, my students. This is a methodology session for teaching English. And since methodology consists of a set of methods, here is a brief overview of ways to teach English. So at the end of this lesson, you are going to be introduced to the most common methods for teaching English. And we are going to show also the advantages and disadvantages of these methods. My students in ts1 and ts2 education, uh, you are responsible for teaching English for cycle 1. What I mean grade 1, grade 2 and grade 3. And here is teacher Manal Saleh explaining to you the most common methods in teaching English language as a second language. And here we start with the first method, that is the grammar translation method, as you see here. The first common method we are going to talk about is the grammar translation method, and since its name is grammar translation method, so it depends on grammatical rules. Let's start reading and explaining. The grammar translation method aimed at making learners understand grammar in traditional terms and acquire a wide literary vocabulary of a second language. So, this method is based upon understanding grammar in traditional terms. When we say traditional terms, so it is based upon rules. We teach grammar according to rules. So this method is based upon rules. We teach grammar according to rules and through acquiring a wide literary vocabulary of a second language, because when we have to build a sentence, uh, we need vocabulary in order to build it. So this method teaches both grammatical rules as well as vocabulary. Ultimately, learners were expected to become proficient in writing the language accurately and also appreciate the literary significance and value of reading text. So when our students learn what are the rules of grammar and learn vocabulary, they can write in a proficient way, in a skilled way, and they are going to read, write, and speak correctly according to rules. This method focused on application the rules of grammar, just I have discussed before, which are practiced through translation exercises, okay, in order to teach grammar. This grammar needs exercises in order to make the students practice the rules. Learners are asked to write a piece of composition on a topic based on the reading passage. Our students in grade 1, grade 2, and grade 3 are responsible to write words, sentences, and paragraphs mostly. They are not responsible for writing essays. They are responsible to write words and sentences or paragraphs. It aimed at teaching learners more about the target language and now how to use the target language we are learning in methodology is English as a second language, and this is the target language we are aiming for. This method favors to teach English by rules and not by rules. So all the time when we say grammar, we have to follow rules. Okay, so this method is based upon rules. It aims at training the learners to write the language accurately by regular and systematic practice in translating words and sentences from their mother tongue. Students get no opportunities to practice in the discussions of the unit, and the translations into mother tongue affect the originality of the words. It does not allow the learners to think directly in target language. Thus, it hinders to create a direct link between thought and expression. Because our method, my students, is based upon rules, okay? So all the time our students have to follow rules in order to write sentences or paragraphs. Here we have a disadvantage of this method in a way that it hinders to create communication between teachers and students, because all the time they have to follow rules in order to write or speak. They don't have a lot of communication. This is kind of a hindrance to this method. Most of the instructors acknowledge that this method is ineffective by itself as it does not stress on the spoken form of the language and communicative skills were neglected. So the instructors say that this method is effective, but in case of communication, it is somehow not important. The material this method worked was literary and as such of little use in transactions because we don't have a lot of communication. Hence, this method does not enhance the students' communicative ability in the second language. All the time they have to write according to rules, so we don't have a lot of communication in this method, although it is important to teach them rules in order to write correctly as well as speaking correctly. Let's move now to another common method that is named the direct method. In the direct method, the term direct refers to the fact that learners are in direct contact with the target language. And what is our target language here? It is the English language. The aim of this method was to develop in the learners the ability to think in the language, whether in speaking, reading, or writing. So the direct method, our students are is in a direct contact with the language. They have to speak, they have to read, and they have to write. Let's see what are the procedures following this direct method. Classroom instruction is conducted exclusively in the target language. All the instructions that must be given throughout the class must be in the target language, must be in the English language. No other language can be used. Only everyday vocabulary and sentences are taught. All the time in these sessions, we are using vocabulary and sentences of every day, and this is important, okay, because it gives the students the chance to use English language in speaking, reading, and writing. Oral communication skills are built up in a carefully graded sequence placed around question and answer interactions involving both the teacher and students in small and interactive classes. In the direct method, there is a kind of communication, and it's done through a dialogue form between the teacher and the student. The teacher asks questions, and the students have to answer. So there's a kind of communication skill that is done orally between the teacher and the student. Also, grammar is taught inductively. Also, students can have grammatical sessions through these dialogues, and it can be taught inductively, I mean through reading. They can see grammar and show grammar in text through reading. Concrete vocabulary is taught by using real-life objects and pictures, and abstract vocabulary is taught by connecting various ideas. Also, in the direct method, they can learn vocabulary, and as we know, vocabulary is taught through making them see true and real-life objects and pictures. And if some vocabulary are not clear, they can try to understand it through various ideas and expressions. Also, they can get from the direct method correct pronunciation and the grammar that were emphasized before. It's through the repetition of reading, they can have correct pronunciation, and grammar can be emphasized before these sessions. However, in this method, the teaching is done entirely in the target language. Yani, all these things are done only by using English language. The learner is not allowed to use his or his mother tongue. Yani, if his mother or her mother tongue is Arabic, it's not available to be used in the class. Only the target language must be used. The direct method was popular towards the end of the 19th century, sometimes, and in the beginning of the 20th century. Here we are reading some of the hindrances or the disadvantages of this method. This method was successful in private schools, but found it difficult to use in public schools as there was a demand on teachers that they should use high proficiency and native like fluency in spoken English. So it was somehow successful in private schools than in public schools. It was not possible to learn the second language just like the first language since there was not enough time and opportunities available in the schools. Teachers were expected to teach only in target language, which was a great struggle for them. When we need to use English as a first language, we need a struggle sometimes with the students to understand what we want to explain and discuss. Learners were confused as there was no selection and grading of vocabulary and grammar were carried out. These are some of the disadvantages and hindrances that the direct method had uh, had it. Now we move to a third common method that is the audiolingual method, the ALM method. Uh, in this method, the audiolingual method, we mean the oral method, where we have a lot of communication. The audiolingual method, that is the ALM, okay, and this method is done orally. Let's read some of the salient features of this audiolingual method. What are some of its characteristics or of its original and important characteristics? Language teaching begins with the spoken language. The material is taught verbally before it is offered in the written form. This method says that language teaching starts orally before we write, okay? It's taught verbally, I mean orally, before it is offered in the written form. They listen to it, then they write it. So this is one of its uh, good things or advantages. The target language is the only language of the classroom. The mother tongue of the learners is not to be used. When we want to communicate with our students, we are obliged to only use the target language, that is the English language teaching. As I explained before, the mother tongue, if it is not English, is uh, prevented to be used in the class. New language items are introduced and practiced situationally through contextualized dialogues. Well, in this method, the audiolingual method or the oral method, uh, we have the chance to present any subject we want about in the class. Okay, so we can have dialogues in any subject we need to discuss. Items of grammar are called structures and graded following the principle that simple forms are taught before complex ones. Grammar is induced from examples given and no explicit grammar rules are to be provided. In the dialogues we need to discuss with our students. The grammar that is found in these subjects must be explained before. We do not present a new grammar with a new language. So the grammar that is taught in these dialogues must be taught before to our students. Reading and writing are initiated once an adequate grammatical foundation is laid. Our students in the audiolingual method can read and write if they have enough grammatical rules understood and explained before. The teacher is the role model. Student-to-student interaction takes place in chain drills or when students take different roles in dialogue. When we say oral method or audiolingual method, so we have to do a lot of dialogues with the students, and dialogue is a conversation between teachers and students, and later it can be between student to student. It depends according to the rules that the teachers are going to make. Uh, some of the disadvantages of this method uh, is that the audiolingual method began to decline as students failed to achieve long-term communicative capability. And this method although it provided potentially good tools of SLA, its lack of concentration on meaning and fluency detracted from its success. Well, we all know that teaching English as a first or as a second language is somehow a struggle or difficult to continue with the students all the time communicating with them. So the student somehow fails to achieve a long-term communicative capability. He doesn't have the capability to all the time have communication with the teacher. So this is a kind of hindrance between teachers and students to this oral method. Students don't like to participate all the time using the target language in the class. Another common method for our lesson of today is the communicative approach. Communicative approach, or we have the method that is communicative language teaching, the CLT method. Since it is communicative language teaching, so this method is based upon communication. Okay. Communicative approach claims that learners' motivation is increased if they feel that they are working on communicative skills. They assert that a language is learned effectively when the focus is not on language and that learners learn how to communicate by communicating, by interacting with their teachers and fellow students. So what's the objective out of this method? The objective out of this method is to teach students how to learn the target language by communicating. They have to communicate all the time by interacting with their teachers and fellow students. They have to use English all the time in the class. If they have to ask, they have to use the English language. If they have to speak with their fellow students, they have to use the English language. So it is based upon communication. Let's see, please, what are some of the characteristics of this communicative language teaching? The aim is to make the learner attain communicative competence, that is using language accurately and appropriately. So the target also behind this method is to use language accurately in a correct way and appropriately in a suitable and appropriate way. Students يعني have not to make a lot of mistakes, okay? So they have to use grammar, they have to use reading, they have to use the speaking, but they have to use this language in accurately in a correct way without mistakes. The prime focus is on the learner. Of course, what's the objective here is to make our students in grade 1, grade 2, and grade 3 use the language. In the communicative language teaching, our students in these grades have to use the language. The teacher is just a facilitator. That is, he is a person who manages the environment and materials which will help the learners become autonomous. Like that, I mean independent and self-confident in using the language. This method relies on authentic materials, true materials, the tests that are purposeful and meaningful. Yani the tests, the drills, the exercises that the teachers must work on must be purposeful, okay, built upon a purpose and must be meaningful to the students. I cannot give them a subject that they don't understand it. I must deal with a subject that my students understand what it is. Yani from their curricula like that, they understand what is a family. So I pretend to have my subject family one, or talks about nature, or about school, whatever, a subject that they know about. Thus, the communicative task can be judged immediately for its success by the learner himself, herself, as well as he is going to share and communicate with the target language. He is good to himself or herself. So it's immediately judged by its success. The CLT, that is the communicative language teaching, emphasizes the functions of a language rather than the rules. So, the objective of this method is to work according to the function of the language rather than rules. We are not teaching rules each and every time. We are using the language like that. I give them sentences, expressions, different subjects and I need them to memorize these sentences and expressions and ideas, and to memorize it in order to use it when it is suitable in each subject. So it depends on functions, on how the language functions, rather than on rules. Uh, Also, communicative tasks aim at making the learners fluent, as well as accurate in the target language. When students use the language in communication, they are better learned students, they are better educated students, okay? They are more self-confident, they are more independent to using this language. When they use the sentences, the expressions, the ideas, so they can be using English language as a fluent one. Also, the use of techniques to encourage student participation in natural environments, group work, and the pair work, role play, simulation, and information gap exercises. All these techniques help students to practice this method and give them self-confidence to use it more and more. So these are the most common methods you are going to be learned and teach throughout the year. So I hope you have enjoyed reading the lesson. So please study it carefully. Study the four methods I have just discussed. The grammar translation method, the direct method, the audio lingual method, that is the oral method, and the communicative language method teaching. These methods are effective for teaching English later. So please read the lesson carefully, and in case of any discussion, join me on my private WhatsApp number, and I will discuss you more methods, and we are going to talk more about methodology in later sessions. So I hope you have understood what I have discussed, and you must put in mind that methodology um, is a set of methods that we are going to deal throughout the year. You as a student, you are not learning English as usual in this method of in this session of methodology. You are going to learn how to teach English. So the target of this methodology of English language is to help you in teaching English, not in learning English, in teaching English to cycle one, that is grade 1, grade 2, and grade 3. Goodbye.